Welcome to KRQE's New Mexico News Insiders. Here's Gabrielle Burkhart and Chris McKee.
When it comes to crime and traffic enforcement overall, there's one agency in New Mexico that has the agency to tackle those things across the entire state of New Mexico, and that is the New Mexico State Police.
And if you are anywhere in New Mexico, chances are you've probably seen them in their black and gray uniforms and vehicles. State Police has a statewide presence divided up into districts across New Mexico, and over the last year, they've had a lot more of a presence here in the Albuquerque metro area. We're going to talk about that and a few other topics today with our guest here joining us in studio. That is New Mexico State Police Chief Troy Weisler. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Chief, you were appointed by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham in June 2023. This has been about a year, or maybe it was May 2023, and then it became official around June. You succeeded Chief Tim Johnson after he retired, but you have had a long career with state police, starting off, as I understand, in Deming and Moriarty in the early 2000s, eventually serving as deputy chief in 2021. So Chief Weisler wanted to ask if you could tell us just a little bit more about yourself. How has your career in law enforcement led you here today to this chief position?
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of crazy to look back. Somebody asked me just the other day how long it had been, and I think it's been 21 and a half or almost 22 years, which is kind of crazy to think about. But it's been a great career. I've been fortunate enough to live and work all over the state and pick up a lot of experiences along the way, which I think helped prepare me as much as one can be prepared for the position that I'm in now.
How different is this position? It feels like when you become the chief of an agency, and this is just me speculating from not being in the political realm, but it feels like you're entering a really political realm as a chief of a department. What do you think?
No, absolutely. I mean, I spent several years before I entered this position very close to the position. I mean, as a deputy chief, I was interim deputy cabinet secretary on the other side for a little while. So I knew a lot of kind of what the day-to-day entailed as far as just the job. But, there's a definite difference when all of a sudden you're not just the one making the suggestion, you're the one that's making the final decision. You're the one that's, has to deal more directly with some of those more political aspects. And so, that's definitely been a change, an adjustment, something that's taken some getting used to.
And did you ever see yourself being in that position?
No, I don't think so. I think I've always kind of assumed that deputy chief was probably as high as I would go, just because I'm kind of a nuts and bolts, get the job done kind of person. I'm less on the political side and into all that stuff. I'm kind of the one that you give the job and we'll figure out how to get it done. But now I've been given this job, and hopefully we can figure out how to get it all done.
Yeah.
If it ever can be all done.
Yeah, it's a large feat to manage this law enforcement agency that really has, activity across the entire state of New Mexico. And I'm curious from you, having worked in other districts, both smaller and places like Albuquerque and Santa Fe, how has working in law enforcement here in New Mexico shaped how you view crime in New Mexico and the role of law enforcement to address it?
Well, I think one of the neat things about state police, we're divided into 12 districts, and state police has the unique ability to kind of fill whatever niche needs to be filled in each one of those communities. And different places around the state have very different needs. Some areas, maybe we're mainly just focused on traffic enforcement because local law enforcement has the resources and capabilities that they need to take care of things. And, other areas, maybe resources are a little more lacking, and we need to step up and do more outside of just the traffic realm. We need to do criminal investigations. We need to answer calls. In rural communities, a lot of those agencies don't have anybody out after hours overnight, and so we need to handle that. And so it's given me a very wide perspective because, like I say, we are involved in virtually every kind of law enforcement, just to different degrees around the state. That's what also makes it interesting, though. You go to a different area and you have a whole new set of things to learn as opposed to other parts of the state.
Yeah, the differences between Albuquerque and Deming are vast in terms of, I imagine, what you face as a department.
Yeah, that's also one of the challenges, right? Operating in a very urban setting versus operating in a rural setting. I mean, that's one of the unique challenges, I think, for the agency and for my officers.
Given the scope of your experience, because we will talk about like specific programs and operations that state police is doing, but I'm just curious from you, do you see like a theme of crime that New Mexico really, that you feel like we really need to deal with? What's one of our biggest crime problems in your view?
There's no secret answer. I mean, I think it's pretty clear, we have a major violent crime issue, and we have a major drug issue. Most of my career was either in the Investigations Bureau or what now is crime suppression, dealing with both of those areas. In particular, where we've kind of seen that manifest the last year or so is the attacks on officers. We've had 3 officers, killed in the last year. We just had another violent assault on one of my officers earlier this week. None of this is statistical, but when you look at how many officers get killed, in the country in violent assault every year, like we are far and above where the national average is and, where we should be. I mean, one's obviously too many, but we're well past where we should be.
We do want to talk a little bit more about that Crime Suppression Bureau, but I'll get to one other question we had here before that. It revolves around, I think, how the department has changed when it comes to technology. I'm always curious with just how police are utilizing new technology throughout their departments. And I think even in our lifetime, we've really seen that evolution there. I think when we both started in 2013, you had standard definition body cameras that I think Albuquerque Police and a few other departments, but very few of them were using in the city, or in the state, I should say, rather. Now you have just a wide variety of cameras infused into policing, that just being one example. But, obviously cameras, AI, GPS tracking, there are a lot of things we're seeing law enforcement try and use to get that edge or an advantage over criminals. Wanted to ask you, what kind of technological resources do you see today as being the most valuable to policing?
Well, as you stated, I mean, technology's increased exponentially. A police unit in 1980 and the equipment in it was not that different than a police unit in 2000, maybe even 2005. But the difference between a unit in 2005 and a unit today is vastly different. I mean, I get in a unit, I haven't been in uniform patrol in several years. I get in a unit now, and I have to ask what 2/3 of the stuff in there is. And, if you have a IT problem, like, oh, it's a major crisis. But I think the biggest impact that we have or that we can get from technology right now is anything that allows us to be more efficient, that can serve as a force multiplier. I mean, that's obviously a struggle for law enforcement around the country. State police is no different, and that is staffing, especially with the large geographic footprint that we have. All the technological edges we can get that help us assist with that so that we can still provide the same level of service to the community despite those challenges is, I think, what's most critical for us right now.
What kind of tech do you see as a force multiplier, something that can do that?
So we have several projects going on right now. What we have really focused on is efficiency of the use of our resources, being in the areas that were most likely to be needed, targeting that little sliver of the population that drives the vast majority of crime, our repeat offenders, our violent offenders, the people that we are constantly dealing with. And so a lot of that technology revolves around better use of data. I mean, law enforcement has all kinds of data that is just collected, taking reports, responding to calls, interacting with people. We're very siloed. We have this information here, and this other agency has this information there. Nobody's really doing anything with it in a useful manner to help the officer on the street, to help the community on a daily basis, to help deal with some of those problems in a more proactive manner and in a more efficient manner. To one, not only solve the crime that does happen, but hopefully prevent or alleviate some of the other crime before it can happen.
Yeah. And as a large agency, what tech resources do you guys offer some of the smaller agencies?
One of the biggest things with state police is, especially for any sort of major investigation, we rarely are ever doing anything on our own. partnerships are critically important for state police, and the vast majority of things that we do are to assist smaller agencies. And some of that gets back to what I think is one of my main goals as chief of state police, and that is to ensure that all the citizens in New Mexico have access to the highest level of law enforcement services. You shouldn't have to live in the metro area or live in a more well-off community like Los Alamos, to have the best public safety, the best resources if you're a victim of crime. And so that's something that state police is really strive to do. And so a big part of that is providing technical resources, providing crime scene, providing aircraft, providing crash recon, providing all these things that a lot of the smaller agencies either wouldn't have the resources to have, or these major events happen so infrequently that it doesn't make sense for them to invest in it on their own. And so we can fill that gap and take care of that for them.
The specialties that take a lot of training to be able to use well, essentially, is what it sounds like.
And they're just talking about the increased technological aspect. I mean, there's so much more technology that involves money, that involves investment, and that's beyond the capabilities or the resources of some of these communities when they have to look at all the other things they need to address. And so that's where we can step in and help out.
We'll be right back with more of the New Mexico News Insiders.
Hey guys, Chad Brummett here with New Mexico Frontiers, the KRQE original series that focuses on tech and innovation happening right here in New Mexico. We've got a lot of great stories about various businesses, technology, and of course space exploration. So make sure that you follow us on air at KRQE and Fox New Mexico, as well as our KRQE YouTube channel online. In the meantime, let's get back to the New Mexico News Insiders.
Did mention this, of course, state police often partners with other local law enforcement agencies in those big and small operations. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Crime Suppression Bureau and the traveling surge operations that are happening, those targeted enforcement?
Yeah, so it's something that, state police has done off and on, probably most of my career, but it's something that we've really started to re-emphasize during my tenure. Well, and some of it started out with, as you all know, we've probably done whatever you would like to call it, a surge or an enhanced operation in Albuquerque probably once or twice a year the last several years. Those enhanced proactive enforcements, those types of resources, that's another thing that a lot of the rural communities lack. They have personnel just trying to cover shifts. They have personnel just trying to answer calls. They don't necessarily have the time or the resources to go out and look for, wanted violent individuals, to go out and proactively try to build cases on individuals that are conducting organized crime in their areas, whether that be drug trafficking or human trafficking or other things like that. And so that's another area that we can step in, provide resources, provide expertise, provide personnel, and focus on some of those areas where, to some degrees, that portion of the criminal elements, is sometimes able to kind of fly under the radar and undetected. And so we can come in and help deal with that.
So, Chief, there's also something called, quote, intelligence-led policing project, which I looked this up. The FBI describes this as more of a proactive way of thinking in law enforcement, emphasizing analysis and intelligence to prioritize crime hotspots, repeat victims, prolific offenders, and criminal groups, kind of like what you were saying, using data to be more preventative, arguing that sort of reactive policing and rapid response don't really alleviate crime in a general sense. So I got to say that when I was reading that description, it kind of reminded me of the Minority Report. Have you guys seen that movie? It's a Tom Cruise.
It's been a while.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Where they can stop crime before the murderer commits the murder.
Yeah.
But that sort of idea, though, to use technology to prevent crime before it happens, is that kind of like what you're doing in a Minority Report sense?
Well, there's no Tom Cruise, but and I think that's kind of obviously like the extreme Hollywood version, but I think overall the concept is correct, right? We see it time and again, I think too, right? When we see cases or we see incidents that happen, and we go back and we look and we see, hey, there was this piece of this puzzle with this person, this offender, and this other agency had this piece of the puzzle, And man, if we would have known all those things and put that together, like maybe we could have done something earlier to prevent whatever the incident is that we're now having a press conference about or whatever. And so that's really the goal of this project, is to put a lot of those different pieces together that different agencies have, so that we have a more comprehensive view when it comes to offenders, when it comes to locations of crime, hopefully prevent some of these crimes before they're happening. And that doesn't, not like in the case of Minority Report where we're arresting you before you committed the crime, right? But it's like, hey, we have these resources, or we gave this person some attention beforehand, and so this crime just never even happened. Serve, as more of a preventative measure, and to build stronger cases against, those repeated offenders and those individuals that are just repeatedly committing crime and that need to be dealt with in a more swift and certain way. And we have this small percentage driving the crime, and if we could just isolate that section and get them out of the public, I think, in general, we'd all be a lot better off.
Is that happening, though, the sharing of data across agencies now more?
So this particular project, we originally proposed it, I think, in 2021 and got the original round of funding. And so around January is when we kind of hope to start rolling out the first iteration of this. And so the information sharing is all in process right now. We are building the foundation of it. It's taken us about 2 years to kind of just build on the structural part. We have a lot of diverse systems from different agencies that we're having to gather data from. I wouldn't even attempt to get into the technical weeds of that, but
Not everything talks to each other, though.
Not everything talks to each other, and so that's something that we have to work through. We have to work through information sharing agreements between the agencies. What information do they want to share? What do they not want to share? The best example I would give to explain this is when I used to do crime scenes. Everyone remembers CSI used to be on, right? And CSI, they had like their magic computer, right? They would open up and they would enter, Gabrielle, blah, 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 add their name, and like, boom, here's everything about them. We're like, oh, and, it's like, there's no magic system like that in law enforcement, right? It's like, oh, well, let's go look up whoever. Well, let's look in these 11 databases, and that's just our stuff. And then, well, she used to live in Santa Fe, so let's go call Santa Fe and see if they can look up for stuff. And, oh, she used to live in Cruces, so let's call Cruces, and so what we're trying to get now is get all that information in one place so that it is a little bit more like that, right? Like we can go look up the offender and we can see, hey, so this agency dealt with them here and had this outcome. This agency dealt with them there. And we can get a full picture as opposed to those little puzzle pieces that we don't know how they fit together.
Yeah, and that process, I imagine, would take days sometimes, if not weeks, to maybe track all of the databases, depending on how prolific or where somebody may have all those touch points across New Mexico.
No, absolutely. And then cross-reference, right? It's like we're trying to take out the complication and make it much more user-friendly and actionable.
Yeah. One of the things we mentioned off the top of the episode is, a big component of what we know state police does. That's traffic enforcement as well. We know that, of course, if you're caught speeding on a freeway or a highway, no matter where you are in the state, NMSP can pull you over for speeding or whatever traffic infraction might be at hand. But, some have argued as well there isn't enough general traffic enforcement in New Mexico, maybe because officers are busy with dealing with all of those other crimes. What is your take on traffic enforcement as chief? Is there enough traffic enforcement that you feel happens in New Mexico?
No, I mean, I absolutely do not think that there is enough traffic enforcement. I mean, it's been a focus of mine. We did have a large increase in those numbers last year.
La Bajada comes to mind as
well.
La
Bajada, I think that traffic enforcement is a underappreciated, foundational piece of public safety. I think some of the issues and concerns that we even have now, we have around the metro area, just has to do with a general sense of lawlessness or feeling like there's not consequences. And even just seeing law enforcement officers out, even just on the morning commute, somebody pulled over, it changes the behavior, it increases the safety. And I think that, not just from maybe saving that individual's life, because they didn't have their seatbelt on and now they do, or you made them slow down. But just on a much wider level of just having people feel secure and feel like there is some sense of order. Because I think a lot of the concerns that we've had recently out in the community, whether it's homelessness or whatever, is just kind of just feeling that like stuff's a little out of control. And I think traffic safety is going to be an ongoing focus of ours to just try to help with some of that, as well as just the actual traffic safety issues that we have in New Mexico, which is a significant concern.
I think a lot of people would agree with what you just said, like that it's kind of a foundational, sense of safety if they see somebody get pulled over, or if you just run a red light and you're like, well, no one's going to stop me from doing this. But is that why there's not enough traffic enforcement? Is it staffing? Is it officers are just busy with other crimes here?
No, I mean, I think it's definitely a staffing issue. We have upped some staffing here in Albuquerque in the past year. I would like to up it some more so that I could have a full-time, like, rush hour traffic unit, like, on the interstate. We're not there right now. The additional staffing we did add is doing proactive stuff, but it's doing more stuff kind of in the busy swing shift, evening shift type hours. I mean, I think our the Albuquerque district, I know through June, was on pace to shatter any record they had for DWI arrests, I know, in this district before. And so we'll see how that continues through the rest of the year. So, I mean, they're definitely making an impact, but we definitely could use more, especially even just on that morning and evening commute.
We'll be right back with more on New Mexico News Insiders.
Hi, I'm Ann Perrette, an investigative reporter in our KRQE Investigates unit. We are always working on something new. Right after it airs on KRQE, you can always find it on our website, krqe.com, or the next day on our KRQE YouTube channel. And now back to the New Mexico News Insiders.
Shifting gears again, I have to ask about the governor's public health order on guns last year. It was September, so about a year ago, when she issued an executive order declaring gun violence a, quote, public health emergency. That health order also came with the governor appointing former state police chief Pete Casetas to head up a task force on gun violence. We've had him on the podcast since his retirement. A fascinating episode if you want to go back on your feed and listen to that one. But the more controversial part of this, the governor cited, crime statistics and examples to initially justify a temporary ban on carrying firearms in any public space across Bernalillo County. For context, that was quickly challenged with lawsuits and protests. Ultimately, she did renew that health order with some modifications, no outright gun bans, but it came with a promise to work more with state police in the metro to tackle, gun-related crimes. There was also a $750,000 appropriation to help pay for that order. So I'm curious from you, Chief, can you just tell us more about state police's role in that, in tackling crime in the metro area over the last year? And do you think overall it's helped reduce gun-related crimes?
So I think absolutely it's helped reduce crime, and to some extent I'm sure it's helped reduce gun crime. I mean, always the issue with these proactive type activities, you never know what crime didn't happen because of the enforcement action that you were taking. But I mean, as a direct result of that, as I've stated before, we did have added some additional resources both on the uniform side, and we also have added some additional resources on the crime suppression side, specifically targeting violent criminals and violent gangs. A lot of those operational components are a little more long-term, and so some of that maybe we haven't seen publicly come to full fruition yet, but a lot of those things I think we will see going forward. And so I think in general, we have made an impact with those additional resources. We have also added some technological stuff as part of the money from those public health orders. And that's something that we're going to be continuing to do and that we're still doing today, especially on the technology and the investment side. Some of that stuff just takes some time for acquisition and implementation. And, from state police's standpoint, we've added those permanent resources. We don't want to just be coming back and then going away, and then we don't want to be playing whack-a-mole, so to speak, right? So we're trying to, as much as we can, permanently set up some infrastructure to help APD and help BCSO out. Because I mean, they're doing the best they can with the resources they have, and so any way that we can supplement them, we're going to continue to try and do.
Can we expect to see more of a state police presence consistently in the metro?
So that is the goal. You're going to see a lot more here in a little bit. State Fair will be starting, so we'll have have extra 50 folks or so around for that, and some enforcement operations that come with that. And we've been doing some stuff leading up to that, some additional enforcement. So we might have some stuff coming out about that here in the next couple of weeks. And like I said, though, my goal over the course of the next, I don't know exact time frame, but is to build some of those additional resources so that we can have things like a full-time traffic unit to have that constant visible presence on the interstate in the metro area.
So you mentioned this as well off the top. You've been at this job now for just over a year, and we wanted to ask, how has that first year been? Has it been feeling like a learning curve? Have you felt like I'm hitting the ground and doing all the things that I envisioned I wanted to do? And really, what is your goal as state police chief?
I kind of started out with kind of a first 100 days, things I wanted to get done. I think that we did accomplish that. A lot of that, as is always the case, though, you never get as much done as you would hope to get done. We've had a very successful year as far as our activity. We had a successful year on several fronts with the legislature, with a new pay package. So we're very happy with that. The conversation I was just having the other day, though, I was like, how am I still like so busy every day? Like I keep kind of waiting to find that cruise control like part where I can kind of get in a little routine without it always seeming like the sky is falling and there's an overwhelming amount of stuff. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but hopefully we get here sometime before too long. Figure it out.
There has also been some tough moments that I want to acknowledge in this last year. I know one of them was State Police Officer Justin Hare. In March, he was stopped to help a driver on the freeway that he thought had a flat tire, was ambushed, shot, and killed. It sparked a manhunt that all of us were covering, where the shooter was ultimately caught here in Albuquerque. But from your perspective as chief, leading this department across the whole state, what has been maybe the toughest moment for you as state police chief so far that you can share?
No, I think definitely that has been the toughest moment. The call was tough, but what definitely was the toughest was, I drove out there. I went to the hospital. Sitting down, walking in the room, his wife is in the room with him, just being with her. And then his parents arrived right after that, spending time with them and then seeing them have to go through that whole situation, especially at the time, not having the individual in custody and wanting to make sure that we saw that through. That morning, that day, is definitely the toughest thing that I've had, in not only in chief, but I had a lot of tough times in my career, but I would think that's the toughest moment in my career as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, understandable. And he was a local in that area, it seemed like, right? He had a family, kids.
No, absolutely, and I think that's one of the things I like most about state police. I was like, state police, the black and gray that's like New Mexico true. Like, we're very integrated into the fabric and the culture of New Mexico. I joke around that I travel around the country, I go wherever, people talk about 7 degrees of separation. I was like, New Mexico is just like one big small town. It's like 2 degrees of separation. I have people all over the state, so I go somewhere, they find out I work for state police, and they have a New Mexico tie. They'll be like, oh, well, you probably know so-and-so, I'm from Clovis or whatever, and like, oh, yeah, or I find out where they're from, and I was like, oh, do you know so-and-so? Like, within 2 people, we'll have somebody that we both know,
yeah.
And that'll be like, oh, that's my primo, or oh, that's my, he's married to my, it's.
Yeah.
So
we get a lot of that, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a lot. It's very New Mexico true, to your point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you joining us for this conversation. Is there anything that we didn't ask you directly about that perhaps you wanted to add?
I think this is another thing that we are definitely trying to do is, state police, law enforcement, like I said, we are part of the community. We are part of the state. We want people to talk to us. We want to be interactive. We want to be transparent. We want people to know, the person behind the badge. And so that's something that we're really striving to do, is to improve and increase those connections with the community, because we're all in this together.
What's your favorite part of the gig?
My favorite part of the gig is just go to kids going out in the public. Like, so it'll be really fun. Like, I remember State Fair last year. I did not expect it was I don't know if it was law enforcement day. Anyways, I go stop by State Fair, and I hadn't been in a year or two, and I just go walking down the main street there. Just all the kids giving out stickers. Everybody's all excited. I saw some kids when they would go out to lunch, the kids are all excited. I always carry a big thing of stickers in my pocket, and just interacting, and the kids are all excited. The kids want to get their parents to take a little picture with you. I think just kind of getting back to the community stuff, because, with COVID, just with a lot of the stuff that went on for the last, 2020, 2021 was kind of a rough patch for everybody. And so just to kind of have those positive connections again, I think is what I really enjoy the most.
Yeah, the community element of, when we're not working, stressing about things, out there having fun. It's those, it sounds like those moments, those interactions that you're sort of reminded by. It's not all just about, enforcing the laws out there. Of course, that's a huge component of what you guys do, but it's for that societal element so people can go out and have nice things as well.
Yeah.
It seems.
No, it's a good reminder of why you do it, right? As opposed to all the headaches of the day or the fires that you're dealing with, right? But at the end of the day, hey, this is why we do this, and this is what's actually important, not just all the noise.
Yeah.
Chief Weisler, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you all for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Again, a big thanks to Chief Troy Weisler of New Mexico State Police. He's been on the job again, as we said, for just over a year, and trying to follow through on the plans on how to take this department forward. And I think we got a clearer picture for him. Specifically, I think what was telling was his wanting to put more attention towards traffic enforcement. That was one thing I brought up. La Bajada, that's where a construction project happened. State Police had been sending out basically weekly emails for a year about how many people they were pulling over in that area. So it was very clear, it's been clear, at least to me on that reporting news sense, that that's something that is close to him and his priorities, you could say.
Yeah, and that data tracking, like you said, paying attention to hotspots where, people were getting away with speeding a lot in that area. I think a lot of people would agree that it is a foundational sense of safety if you know that traffic enforcement is going to happen in your area.
A lot of cars in this city without license plates all the time. It is.
I mean, I gotta say, I noticed it first when I moved here. And as soon as you cross the border into the Texas state, there are gonna be state troopers ready to pull you over if you're going 5, 10 above. So, but if you have an idea that you'd like to hear from on our podcast, or a story idea, someone you'd like to hear from, always feel free to reach out to us. I'm Gabrielle.Burkhart@krqe.com via email, and gburknm on social media.
And I'm Chris.McKee at krqe.com, also at Chris McKee TV. Thank you for listening.